Hey guys, Vika here. You're with the Modern Creatures and joining us is the POCO X4 Pro 5G. Now today's video is going to be a little bit different. Instead of our usual review, we'll be taking this phone out and about for a real-world test of sorts. Since POCO is positioning this as an all-around ace, we'll be taking it, well, all around. So I thought about the things that mattered most to me when choosing an everyday phone for myself, and it boiled down to 4 things. That's camera performance, entertainment, gaming, and of course battery life or how long it charges. And these are the things we'll be testing this POCO X4 Pro 5G on, so let's start.
Now we're starting with photography because camera performance is usually what I first look at when choosing a smartphone for myself. So on this doozy of a camera bump is a 108 megapixel main camera with an 8 megapixel ultra-wide and a 2 megapixel macro.
Kevin and I had planned to visit the art fair over the weekend, so I thought it would be the perfect opportunity to take this device out and test its cameras in the real world, see how it is in different lighting scenarios, and how well it can translate color.
We were there around noon, so there was plenty of light available. Photos taken with the X4 had pretty sharp details and showed fairly accurate color reproduction as well. This came in handy in taking photos of these colorful pieces at the art fair. Photos of the nearby park showed a bit more saturation than I would prefer, however, these photos are still pretty good. One thing I noticed though is that noise is rather quick to show up even in well-lit environments. It's fairly visible in the shadows and sometimes even in the midtones. But again, if you look at the overall photo, it's still very pleasant to look at. Low-light photos can look good if you're able to keep a steady hand. Details are present but not as sharp. Night mode can help clean things up though and produce pretty great shots. Around the front, we have a 16 megapixel shooter. I take many selfies with my cat, and for that reason alone, the X4's front camera is more than enough. But on a more serious note, this selfie shooter is able to churn out detailed photos when in well-lit environments. Quality starts to slip otherwise. I also like the beautification on the POCO X4 Pro as it's not that exaggerated as others I've encountered.
For video, this does max out at 1080p at 30 frames per second, which isn't really the highest around, but it is practical, and 1080p for most people is more than enough.
Of course, we have different modes on here too for more creative in-camera options.
So after all that, what do I think about the POCO X4 Pro 5G's cameras? Well, they're alright, especially if you're just a casual shooter and especially for its price. Its 108 megapixel camera isn't the best I've seen around, but it can perform quite consistently and give you good photos, good enough for social media and things like that. It probably won't be versatile enough though if you're a content creator or a more serious photographer or videographer.
Well, I think that covers most of what you might want to know in terms of camera, but questions are always welcome, leave them down below. Let's move on for now. Next up is entertainment. Watching on our devices is something some, if not all of us do. I personally don't binge too long, maybe 3 or 4 episodes at most, since I do prefer watching on a bigger screen. Still, watching on the X4 Pro isn't hard to do because it's pretty enjoyable.
The screen is large. We have 6.67 inches here, and it's AMOLED with DCI-P3 support, so colors are pretty much on point, whether you're just watching or browsing or going through social media. And another thing that makes this phone really great to bring around and to have is that it has Corning Gorilla Glass 5 protection up front. What this means for clumsy old me is that I can put it almost anywhere without really worrying about scratching the screen too much.
Another thing I really love about this phone are its stereo speakers. They're found here on the top and bottom of the device and offer high-res audio certification, which means it outputs clear and detailed sound. If you play high-res clips, you can barely hear any distortion from the device, even when you max out the volume.
But if you prefer headphones, there's also a 3.5mm headphone jack on board. One letdown for me in terms of watching on this device is that we're limited to SD or standard definition streaming on Netflix and 1080p on YouTube. Another thing to note is that this phone is built almost flat everywhere, so it can get difficult for some to hold it for longer periods of time. So binge watching can be difficult for some.
And quickly, since we're talking about its build and design, I just want to say that this phone can run hot, using the cameras for a couple of minutes and you can feel the heat here on top, so that's something to think about too.
But let's remember that this is an all-around device, meaning it should be able to do a lot of things pretty well, not necessarily the best. So compromises like this are expected, especially since you have premium features like its stereo speaker or its 120Hz screen for that matter. I would love it if this could stream higher resolution video, but I'm already getting a lot of use out of its speakers for listening to music on Spotify or even gaming.
Speaking of gaming, that's where we're heading next. Equipped with a Snapdragon 695, this mid-range device performs as expected of its class. I'm also not a big mobile gamer, but I do play a little bit with Genshin Impact, Pokemon Unite, and Pokemon Go being my go-to games. Genshin Impact defaults to low settings, but I was able to make it run higher on a fresh install. As I added more apps, however, it started having a harder time. Turning down the graphics became the fix. For the other two Pokemon games, these aren't too demanding, so no problems here. If you play League of Legends or Mobile Legends, I tested these out too, and I'm glad to report smooth performance with no lags.
So while not for serious gamers, this phone can still handle a couple of casual matches. And if you're wondering about its performance outside of gaming, maybe for Facebook, Instagram, Canva, or other apps, let me just tell you, if it can handle more demanding apps like Genshin Impact, it should be able to do the everyday tasks pretty well. Things do take a beat to load sometimes when you're taking a photo. It does take a while to process, but nevertheless, its mid-range chip should be able to handle all the usuals.
And finally, let's talk about its battery. This is pretty important to me as I'm not the most diligent when it comes to charging my phone. The POCO X4 Pro 5G comes with a large 5000 mAh battery, and even with its high refresh rate, it can last long. Taking it out of the house on a full charge, I was still able to come home at night with about 20% of battery left. And that's with using the cameras quite a bit. But another thing that makes this phone a great all-around device is that it can charge fast. With support for 67-watt charging, I was able to reach a full charge in just 45 minutes. So having put through the POCO X4 Pro 5G through all that, what can we conclude? Well, what makes this device so enticing is the amount of premium features that it offers at a more accessible price. Performance isn't on the high end of the spectrum, but there are a handful of things that make it stand out in its segment, like its stereo speakers and 120Hz display. As to how it is as an all-around device, it can definitely be one if you stick to less demanding apps or tasks. So for smaller things like managing socials, simple photo edits, and other everyday things like shopping or even banking are what this phone can knock out of the park. As usual, if you want to know more about this device, more details are down below.
The all-around ace is alright in my book, plus it's a good value too. So that's it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and as usual, please do visit our website and our other social media channels for more news, features, and reviews. Once again, I'm Vika. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.